Field Planning and Zoning Commission to order. Joe, could you please call the roll?
Sure. Rich Roberts is
Here.
here. Ryan Allard. Joe Hammer here. Jim Hughes.
Yes.
George Oikel.
Here.
Tom Dean.
Here.
Tony Homicki. Dave Edwards.
Here.
David Drake.
Here.
Peter Lambruni.
Here.
Paul Thompson.
Here.
And our new alternate, Joe Ercolani.
Here.
Okay.
All right, thank you. Since it's Joe's first meeting, I'm not going to put him on the spot until we have either someone leave, pass out, or recuse themselves. What we have on the agenda tonight are 3 different public hearings. The way the public hearings work is they begin with the applicant coming forward, identifying themselves by name and address for the record, explaining what it is that they want to do. There'll be some back and forth with the commission after that. At that point, we'll open it up to members of the public who want to come forward and speak either for or against the application. We would ask that you address the commission, not the applicant. Don't have, back and forth conversations among yourselves. You're providing testimony to the commission. If you do come up again, we'd ask you to identify yourself by name and address for the record, just so that we can keep track of who's participating. Once the members of the public have had their chance to speak, we'll have the applicant come back up, respond to the public testimony, respond to any additional comments or questions that the commission members may have. If at that point we believe we have enough information to make a decision on the application, we'll close the hearing and go into deliberations. At that point, there's no more public input. If after the public participation, the applicant comes forward and talks to the commission, we still think there's open questions or additional information that we need in order to effectively evaluate the application, we'll continue the hearing to our next meeting. But either way, you'll know tonight what it is that we're doing. So with that, first item, public hearing 2150, 2123Z, Amanda Ostrowitz seeking a zoning text amendment to section 513D of the Weathersfield, zoning regulations for adult use cannabis, tabled from 520.
I heard the projector's maybe not so great today, so I printed out some handouts.
Right.
Rich, just so it's clear going into the hearing, I will not be participating in this one.
Okay, so Joe will be seated for this application.
The other Joe.
Yeah, the other Joe to my right. Thank you.
See if I have enough to give you one.
Thanks.
Move on over here. Should keep 1 second myself. Do you guys have enough to follow along with?
Yeah, we're good.
Okay, fantastic. So we're back here again today, and thank you for hearing this text amendment.
Excuse me, could you just identify
Amanda
yourself again?
Ostrowitz, 63 Green Tree Drive, Glastonbury.
Okay.
As many of you have probably seen me before, throughout the process of the cannabis regulation adoptions, I'm back today to ask for a reduction in the setbacks to churches. So back on March 21st, the PZC adopted a comprehensive set of cannabis regulations to address adult use cannabis, and it went into effect on April 20th. And after the close of public hearing at that meeting, an amendment was made to add 1,000-foot setbacks to schools and churches. Admittedly, I advocated for a school setback, but after the close of it, there was a motion to adopt the same setbacks that had been in the medical, which happened to have included churches as well. So that church setback basically created a de facto ban on cannabis establishments. Once you put in place the setback to the schools, along with the zoning and churches, There's basically 5 to 10 parcels in the entire city left behind that worked, and they were not viable nor available. They're things like office buildings, gas stations, etc. So there truly remains nothing when you have both of these setbacks in place. Now, that problem was further compounded by the fact that there are several buildings here in town in the retail corridor that were not built to be churches. They were built as offices, they were built as all sorts of things, but they're being used as churches. So like if you look at the New Life Church, it is very clearly a repurposed office building. And if you look at where the one at 48 Silas Dean is, and we're on slide 3 here, it's got like a dojo in it and a few other different types of businesses. So not what you look at and think of as a church. So that just really compounded the problem, especially those two in particular, really knocked out the vast majority when combined with the schools. If you look at what the church setbacks are in neighboring communities, the 1,000 feet would be by far the most stringent in the area. And what I'm requesting today will still be amongst the most stringent in the area. So if you look at Bloomfield, Hartford, West Hartford, Meriden, and East Hartford, there are no church setbacks. When you look at East Windsor, their limitation is not within the same building. In Newington, right adjacent to us, it's a 100-foot setback from churches. In Manchester and New Britain, you have 200 feet, and in Bristol, you have 250 feet. So in every direction around us, there are no 1,000-foot buffers to churches. And a lesson can be really well learned from East Hartford. East Hartford was actually one of the first towns here to pass comprehensive cannabis zoning regulations right after adult use happened. They wanted to attract some businesses. They unfortunately put it in a zone that wasn't a very attractive zone for businesses, and they had extremely robust setbacks. And then we read some minutes back in February where they were actually pretty disappointed they hadn't gotten any applicants. They were wondering what had gone wrong. And they figured it out. It was their setbacks and their zoning. So they expanded their zoning and they reduced their setbacks not even to something like 250 feet, which is what we're requesting tonight. They made it so that they actually took churches out of the list altogether, and things like schools and government properties are no longer, they just can't be on the adjacent property. So their setback is literally just to an adjacent property, not even any number of feet, and church has been entirely removed. So they actually adopted those regulations on June 28th to address this same concern of creating a marketplace that didn't function. So what I'm here today to propose is to retain the school setback. I don't want to change that one bit. I think we need to keep this away from children. And so I think the school setback at 1,000 feet, while it is amongst the most stringent in the state, I think it's perfectly appropriate because what's quite unique to Wethersfield is the placement of the schools, right? They are in this big commercial corridor, and you want to keep it away from kids, and that's what you've got to do. But we are requesting to reduce the church setback to 250 feet, but only where the proposed cannabis establishment is separated from the church by a 4-lane highway, i.e. a Silas Dean. So not 250 feet where you might walk out of church, down a couple buildings and be at the cannabis establishment, but where you would actually have to cross a 4-lane highway. And, you know, a 4-lane highway we see as being, even in this, by the way, this setback scheme that I'm offering up is still going to be more stringent than any of those surrounding ones. And we see that the 4-lane highway really creates quite a protective barrier, right? The idea is not to have something next to a certain use. These uses are not going to be really very adjacent, right? You're not going to be walking across the street there. You're not going to be disturbing it. There's not going to be much visibility from it when you're separated by a 4-lane highway. You'd have to deliberately go from the church to the dispensary for it really to be interacting with one another. And that's why we think this 4-lane setback is a really good in-between zone and not just a mere 250 feet. And it's a pretty common one that we've seen by zoning standards across the country. So we think it still achieves all of the goals of the setback, but without making a de facto ban. Now, most importantly, I'm not just asking us to say, okay, fine, it's 250 with a 4-lane highway. I really want to remind you that the way that this set of regulations was written, Section 513D7, requires the applicant to identify, nonetheless, all the churches within 2,000 feet of a proposed site, as well as all the other sensitive uses. So this no longer leaves the conversation. We're not going to now pretend there's no churches near these sites. They'll be identified on a 2,000-foot map, and the Planning and Zoning Commission still has discretion to consider them with that site plan application, special permit, excuse me. So I think that, we're not taking away any of the Planning and Zoning Board's discretion. We're just not creating a staunch no by doing so. And I think that's a really important thing to understand. I'm not trying to eliminate the consideration of churches in the 2,000-foot map whatsoever. So those will still come before and be analyzed on an individual basis. I could go on for a while, but I'd rather keep it short and simple. And leave you with any questions you have.
All right. Does anybody have any questions for the applicant? Tom?
I have a question. Why have a public policy that provides distinct supportive treatment or promotion of the establishment of religion in the zoning regulations at all?
If you would like to make a motion to remove it entirely, I would not object. I do understand what you're saying there. I was trying to come up with perhaps the most agreeable middle ground that I felt I could get everyone to agree to, because I don't know where everyone sits here in their religious points of view. So my goal was to create a proposal that could be digestible to all. That's what you're saying. You're saying why have churches addressed at all, correct?
Right. I'm looking at it from a public policy standpoint, not from a religious belief standpoint or any allusion to insult the religious beliefs of anyone. But in a country where governmental entities are forbidden to to establish religion, isn't this part and parcel of a violation of that 250-year-old, almost 250-year-old public policy?
Well, while I am an attorney by background, I am not a constitutional lawyer, so I'll stick with my area of expertise. But yeah, no, I mean, it's a challenging one, right? Because there's one thing about, how do we deal with that, but it's also, right, this is government and people are electeds and they got to serve their constituents, and so people are trying to be considerate of that, and I think appointees want to be considerate of the people who appoint them. And so, I hear you, I'm aligned, but I am open to trying to find a middle ground that's amenable to all. So I do think the alternative could be none, right? It's certainly not what I had anticipated when the regulations were pushed through, but it is where we are today.
Does anybody else have any questions? Anybody? All right. If not, open it up to members of the public. Is there anybody in the public that wants to speak on this application? Tom?
Good evening, Tom Mazzarella, 600 Walcott Hill Road, a Weathersfield resident. I'm also speaking on behalf of the Planning and Zoning Liaison to the Town Council regarding this subject. So, several months ago, we had a meeting. There was an application to or create a set of regulations for cannabis facilities. There was a number of restrictions. One of them was distance to a residence. Another, I believe, was having a standalone facility where it wouldn't be incorporated in a strip mall or something of that nature. And those two items were removed from the regulation because it was seen as that it would be a very limited number of parcels would meet that criteria, because basically homes are all over Silestein Highway or adjacent to. It was a very lengthy process. I think the town spent somewhere around 18 months trying to develop these requirements. One of the points of contention was with myself was that as a council member, we were asked to weigh in and provide our recommendations as to whether this should move forward or not move forward. There was a vote, I believe it was 5-3, that stated that we did not want to have cannabis dispensaries in the town of Weathersfield. I'm still baffled by the fact that we moved ahead and allowed for cannabis dispensaries. We had testimony from the Central Connecticut Health District. We had testimony from our chief of police and from our social and youth services people, all opposed to that. Nevertheless, it was still approved. So today we're hearing that for whatever reason the applicant didn't realize that there was churches within 1,000 feet of the properties that they were looking at. You heard tonight that it's not that there's no properties available. There's no properties that suit their needs or are readily available. So my contention is that just the same as this committee or commission did several weeks ago, the ink is barely dry on this approval. And now the applicant's coming back and wants to change it. It's the same thing that we went through a couple weeks ago with a restaurant that applied for operating hours of a certain time, and at the next meeting or 2 meetings later came back and said, well, we want to extend the hours. We want to change what we applied for. And that's exactly what we're talking about doing tonight. So I am in disagreement with that, and I hope you'll consider that. Thank you.
Thank you. Is there anyone else in the public who wishes to speak on this application?
Good evening, Mike Panic, owner of properties at 1260, 1190, and 1210 Silestein Highway. I spoke at the last meeting when the board met with this regulation, and I just want to say that I'm in favor of the change. I think that I am in agreement with the member who said, you know, singling out churches and making a statement about churches could be controversial. I do agree with that. But I do think that a middle ground is being offered that seems to align with many towns that adjoin us and are around Weathersfield. So I think that the applicant has presented a case for something that is not just taking churches off the table, but trying to find some middle ground. And I agree, and I fully support this, and I hope you will see this as not that there's not any properties in town, but if you use the mapping system that I believe you used originally and start to put circles on the map, it leaves places that are just not suited. It's not that they're not useful for this use, it's just it puts things on the map that just aren't practical for this application. And in order to get, it seems to me that you can't have a regulation and then have nowhere to apply it in town based on the stipulations. So I do think that this is a common ground, and it should be looked at and approved here tonight. Thank you.
Thank you. Is there anyone else who would like to speak on this application? Sure.
Steve Kelly, 29 Old Smithy Lane. I got one basic question. Who's going to make the final determination whether we're going to have these establishments? Is it you guys? Is it the town council?
It's us. There would be a special permit application that is for a specific site that would come here.
All right, well, my point is, having lived here forever, Weathersfield used to have a much higher reputation than I see it having now. And I know what Simsbury and West Hartford have a moratorium. They want to see how the dust settles with this. Not sure what Glastonbury's doing, but I don't think we should be in a big hurry just because the state legislature said, wow, this sounds like a great idea, let's do it, and there's going to be some money coming to the state and to the towns and whatever. I just think you should sit back, wait, see how it floats with everybody else, all these other towns that are going to do it. I just don't think it's a good idea for Weathersfield.
So Steve, we shouldn't say yes or no tonight, we should kind of let it go by the boards?
No, you can.
Just say no until the future?
Well, you'd be saying no because you want to see how, I don't know what bodies in other towns said we're going to have a moratorium. I don't know if it was their planning and zoning or it was their town council, but somebody should.
I'm not sure, Steve. Have to ask the
Yeah.
chairman or something. Denise, she's
I know the police chief was against it, and somebody, I don't know if he made that comment in front of you, and I know somebody made a comment, well, nobody really showed up for or against. And I guess that could be our fault that we don't, I remember back in the old days, Weathersfield was always in the town news. You knew what was happening. And somebody told me today, oh, you have to read the rear reminder to find out what's going on. I just thought that's what you read when you wanted to go buy somebody's lawnmower, but, yeah. So I'd be saying, yeah, you could do a no tonight.
Okay, thanks, Steve.
Wait a minute, Steve, I have a question to ask you. Can I ask him a question?
Well, what's the question?
It's not relevant to this application, can I still
Then
ask
no.
him a question? Are you still have interest on Main Street in the business there?
Yes, I do.
You do? Full interest, full ownership?
As much ownership, as much interest as I want.
The whole thing, oh, whatever that means, okay, thank you. Glad you're still involved, thank
Still
you.
involved.
Makes me feel better about it.
Okay.
All right. Back to this application. Does anybody have anybody else in the public want to speak on this? Sure.
Hello, Frank DeMacco. Speaking for the applicant to do the dispensary here in the town of Weathersfield. As the young lady was saying earlier, the town of Weathersfield does have one of the strongest conditions in reference to distances for dispensaries or other facilities. Going through this on different issues that I'm dealing with for other ventures, some towns require only 250 feet from a school, and they require 100 feet from a residence, from door to door, not property line to property line, door to door. So every town, every city has its own issues. With this, just so that you realize, you have a dispensary, call it in town. It's right where the old Hartford Drive-In is, where the tennis courts are, off of Prospect Street. You have Fine Fettle. And the way to get into Fine Fettle is two locations, one off of the Berlin Turnpike and one off of Prospect Street. One side of their dispensary is medical. One side of their dispensary is recreational, if you want to call it. So to put one on the South Highway would not be a bad idea. It's a business corridor. It's a retail corridor. You're not dealing with children. You are dealing with adults, consenting adults who are over the age of 18, I believe. Religion aside doesn't really matter. Some religions choose marijuana. Some religions don't choose marijuana. But last I do recall, church and state don't mix. So I don't know why you even have that in your issue. But for the schools and children under the age of 18, wholeheartedly, you don't mix the two. To put something on the Salesian Highway, I don't see why it would be an issue. The window that you have to capture any of these sales and the potential increase in tax revenue is not large. These guys have been out snooping and signing facilities for months. So to grab one at this opportunity would be something to take advantage of, and they will generate revenue for you. And I just remember the old story of the propane tanks that C&G wanted to put up in Cromwell and Rocky Hill. And the town of Rocky Hill said, no, we don't want that on our property. And they went from General Paving's yard right over the town line and still stuck it right to Rocky Hill because they were worried about the blasting radius. So what's really the issue with whether it's the Newington line and right on the line in Weathersfield or on the Salesian Highway where you can actually generate something, because you're still getting all that traffic in through our town or this town. Now why not just capture some of the revenue on it? And that's basically it. Thank you.
All right, thank you.
He just gave his name, he didn't give his contact.
Yeah, just give an address.
I live in Glastonbury, but I have a project that we're doing here in Weathersfield, so I do pay taxes.
Okay, I just
Yep.
Hi, Tom Carson, 12 Avalon Place. I wrote a letter in opposition to this text amendment, but I just wanted to supplement it with, in the past week, the CDC came out with a report, and this is from an NBC News story about the CDC report. It says the number of young people consuming toxic levels of marijuana edibles or smoking pot to the point that they require emergency shot up dramatically during the pandemic, the CDC reported last Thursday. The new data are concerning to pediatric emergency care doctors like Dr. Caleb Ward at Children's National Hospital in Washington, D.C., but they're no surprise. It would be an unusual week if we're not seeing a child presenting to our emergency room with side effects from cannabis ingestion. While older teenagers accounted for the vast majority of cannabis-related ER visits, the most stunning increase was found among children under the age of 11, a 214% increase on average from 2019 to 2022. I'll stop reading there because I've made this point before, and when the regulations were previously discussed. But this has to be about, at some point, this has to be about protecting our children and our young children, because what they're selling isn't necessarily cannabis pills or bags of, of pot. It's about brownies and cookies and gummies and candies and things that are packaged that are attractive to children. And I think we're just seeing the cusp of it right now. I think it's going to get much worse. And I think the decisions we make today are going to affect children in the future. Thanks.
Thank you. Did you want to summarize your letter?
I can't remember. I wrote it a month ago. I can't remember what I said.
Yeah, I'm just too lazy to read it.
I urge you to reject the proposed zoning text amendment. The applicant was given a lot of time over multiple hearings to lobby this commission when you were considering these regulations. At one hearing, you even accommodated her by allowing her to testify by video on a laptop that was held up to a microphone by her associate. Most of her asks were granted. The one ask from her that wasn't granted was the elimination of the 1,000-foot separation requirement from houses of worship. Now, exactly 2 months after the enactment of these regulations, which were considered and debated for approximately 18 months, she asked to change that separation distance requirement. Please do not allow this applicant to rewrite our zoning regulations. That's enough. But I would like to her address about children. I would like the applicant to address just this about the products that they sell and how attractive they are for children.
Thank you. Is there anyone else who wishes to speak on this application?
One more by video.
Okay.
Turn up the volume, please.
Hello, can you hear me?
Barely.
All right, how about now?
Yep.
All right. I'm recovering. I've been under weather for the last 10 days, so apologize if my voice isn't coming out clear. My name is Neville Patel, and I'm one of the potential applicant for cannabis retail in Weathersfield, represent Shangri-La Cannabis. We have a total of 6 locations that we will have in state of Connecticut, and we've gone through multiple zoning process. And I do appreciate everyone's time on this afternoon to hear us out. I do support this change, and I want to make few comments in regards to some of the issues that were brought up. One of the first one was church. I think more than one individual have presented their side on church, and really factually, no church representative has came to this meeting to oppose this. In so many words, that tells us something. If churches in general had problem, they would likely make a point to represent themselves as part of this meeting. Second, we should understand that while most of us are very healthy and live happy life all day, every day, some of our friends, parents, relatives are not in same condition. Marijuana has a very strong medicinal use, and even in adult use market, majority of the individuals who walk through those doors and walk out those doors need marijuana as their medicine. This has been proven over and over and over again. More than 70% of United States states within the United States have recognized this as medical for certain condition. So even if we are healthy and we don't have a use for it, we should respect that some citizens and our neighbors may actually need this for their medication. Blocking locations and placing this dispensaries away from public's eye really puts burden on not only applicant, it puts burden on patient. And mind you that some of the patients are in wheelchairs, some of the patients are handicapped, and they do need reasonable access. Placing these dispensaries away from normal business is a burdensome on them forever and ever and ever. And additionally, employees, these are high-paying retail jobs, and punishing, placing a location in an area that's not visible by public and not allow us to do normal business is punishing these employees that we hire in so many cases. As far as reputation is concerned, I don't see how a reputation of town can be ruined by supporting a different form of medication. Big pharmas have controlled medication for hundreds of years in this country, and we don't have to recognize alternative solution. We don't need 100% of the votes to recognize alternative solution, but we do know that more than 50% of the voters have recognized this as an alternative solution. So I don't see why shaming these businesses is fair while we have no problem promoting many pharmaceutical drugs that actually harms your body and leaves permanent damage. As far as product getting to children's hands, the major difference between a black market or so-called gray market and a legal market, which we represent, is our packaging. Our packaging is not multicolorful. Our packaging is not easily openable by children under the age of 21 or 18. I mean, well, maybe a little less than that. I mean, we precisely the reason we want to promote legal cannabis is to get rid of the black market, and the black market is what allows the product to be in a Ziploc bag versus a versus a sealed container that cannot be opened by children in legal markets. So I respect all of those concerns, but I think all of those concerns are specific reason why we should allow legal cannabis dispensary to conduct normal business and not block them. I don't have much more to say, but I am happy to answer any questions.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
I couldn't hear, how many locations did they have?
They have 6. This is a different business than me. This is a spirit of cooperation.
They're in the retail, because I couldn't hear them.
Yes, they.
I mean, if you're going to testify, please go back up there so that we can catch it on the,
That company has 6 retail licenses in Connecticut that they were awarded. Different company.
And what was their, I didn't catch his address, where he's from.
They're
Address.
Columbia, Missouri.
He didn't give his address.
My address is 1401 Creekwood Parkway, Columbia, Missouri. We do have a majority partner who resides in Hartford, Connecticut. Her name is Jocelyn Serta.
I'm sorry, I couldn't hear it.
They have a majority partner who resides in Hartford, Connecticut named Jocelyn Serta.
Jocelyn Serta, okay.
okay, thank you.
Oh,
Is there anyone else in the public that wants to comment on this application? Anyone else? Last call? All right, come on back up then. All right, does anyone have any follow-up questions for the applicant, or do you want to respond to public comment?
I'd be happy to respond to a couple comments. There's this assertion that I was the applicant back when these regulations were adopted, and I had my chance then. I was not the applicant. This is a planning and zoning application that was initiated by the town of Wethersfield. I was certainly a proponent. And also, I did not have any say or asks or opinions related to churches at the time because they were not in the proposal other than just to be identified. They were added after the close of public comment. So I'm not coming back having asked for before, not liking what I got. I'm coming back now as something came up after the close of public hearing where there was no ability to respond to it at that point in time. With regard to the questions about children, kids will not be allowed in these stores. These stores are 21 years old and over only. These stores have no ability to see in them, so where one could see into a liquor store and see all of the alcohol on the shelves, that is not the case in these stores. You will have to go through multiple security checks before you would even be able to see product, which is all going to be in non-see-through packaging and child-proofed. The only way you do keep children away from cannabis, because no one has to lie, there's cannabis in every one of these communities. Cannabis is here. It's in Wethersfield. It's in Glastonbury. It's in Newington. It's in every town. Right? The difference is now there's the creation of safe access that's restricted and keeps it away from children. Drug dealers in the illicit market are how children gain access to cannabis, or by parents that don't properly store their cannabis. It is not through these stores. So that is my answer with regard to the children. The cannabis is here. The question is, do you regulate it, create safe, restricted access, and give citizens of this area the ability to gain access through a safe, tested, regulated product where children are not allowed in. There's also some comments about other towns that have moratoriums. West Hartford does not have a moratorium. They've already permitted 2 stores. That's from the public side. Now I'll happily answer any questions from the Planning Commission.
Does anybody else have any questions for the applicant? Anyone else? Last chance before we close the hearing.
Actually, a question. So the groups that you represent, none of the groups that you represent from either a development perspective or opening a business in town, none of these folks are Wethersfield residents that you're backing or that you're supporting as part of opening this establishment?
No, you couldn't have been a Wethersfield resident and applied in this round. My partner is from Hartford, Connecticut, you had to be from a disproportionately impacted area.
Okay.
And Weathersfield is not disproportionately impacted. So if you have to have either lived 9 years before you were age of 18, or the last 5 years straight in a disproportionately impacted area to have qualified. And so my majority partner grew up all 18 years of her life in Hartford.
Well, to clarify, I think Paul's question, because your partner that's from Missouri,
That's not my partner.
the person's partner in Hartford, who's from a disproportionately sort of community.
We both have different partners, we're different entities. Today, we're here in the spirit of cooperation, like.
Now, I'm confused. I thought the gentleman who testified via video was partnered with someone in Hartford.
Correct, but that's one group, yeah.
Right. So, to just shoulder on Paul's, so any people have a financial stake, was your question that she's representing? Like, what's anyone's connection to Weathersfield?
That's a clear point, Jim, thank you.
Yeah,
Yes. How is a Weathersfield
Missouri and
resident
someone from
involved?
Hartford. Is there anyone in Weathersfield? That's what, I guess, your question.
I would say the residents of Weathersfield that are involved are the property owners who will be the lucky recipients of long-term tenants who will make substantial improvements to property, increasing property values, increasing revenues to the town. And the citizens who will benefit from the tax dollars that go directly to the town. But there are not any in the whole state of Connecticut that are owned by a Weathersfield resident, nor that are owned by a West Hartford resident, nor.
No, my
that-
question was specifically
Yeah.
about Weathersfield residents being involved in the
Now,
establishment
the
here in
benefit
town.
here is definitely on the property owner side.
But to clarify your point, so you just, I'm still a little confused again on this. So no Weathersfield resident, but there's a gentleman from Missouri that has a stake, is a stakeholder with this person shouldered from Hartford, correct? Right, so maybe the question is, are there any Weathersfield stakeholders in the industry? Is that more of a clarified question?
Only as it pertains to, my question, Jim, was only as it pertains to Weathersfield
Correct, that's
retail
what I was, yeah,
establishments.
that's, take out the real estate side of it on the cannabis, retail cannabis side, that was the question. Because you just made a blanket statement, as far as I understood, that no one in Weathersfield basically is a partner or invested in any way, shape, or form in the cannabis industry in Connecticut. That's what I heard.
Not that is publicly available information. From all the data I have, there are none.
On an now, this is an educational question to help me clarify. On an application to the state, all investors need to be revealed, correct? It just can't be Acme LLC, it has to be Joe Jones, Acme LLC, correct?
Correct.
Okay. All right. Thanks, I appreciate it.
And there's no backers nor social equity candidates that I know.
Thanks.
Okay. All right. Any other questions before we close the hearing? Tom?
On that same issue, same point, could you clarify, because I think there's considerable confusion on this issue, which kind of sound parochial, but the issue of being able to apply for state licensure for such a facility. A Weathersfield resident cannot apply for state licensure due to the fact that this is not a disparately affected area.
They could have as a minority partner, just none did. But they could have not been a majority controlling partner.
Okay. So they could essentially be an investor, but
And I imagine some did, they just didn't win, it was a lottery.
thank you.
Okay.
Yeah, now so you just clarified the question, was there a minority partner, you only spoke to majority partners when Paul asked the question. Yeah. Got it, I understand, thanks, I appreciate the clarity.
All right. Anything else before we close the hearing? Okay, thank you. Someone want to make a motion to close the hearing?
Close.
All right.
Second.
Motion by Jim, second by George to close the public hearing. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Abstention? Okay, hearing's closed. Does somebody want to make a motion to start the discussion?
Make a motion to start the discussion.
No, make a motion.
I
in
got
order
you, the
to
whole,
start
the whole.
Yeah.
I'll make the motion. Let's get it right. Sorry, Rich.
No, you're throwing paper clips on me, too.
make a motion on public hearing 2150-23-Z, public hearing to start discussion, or to make approval. Do I have to make approval on it?
Make a motion to approve.
Make a,
the applicant.
make a motion to approve public hearing 2150-23Z. Make a motion to approve.
Okay,
Second.
all right.
Sorry about that, Rich.
No, no problem. Motion made and seconded, discussion.
So, as I listen to this, I'm thinking back, actually, it was Tom's testimony that started my thinking on this. To date, from a commission's perspective, we've heard no support from the police chief, no support from the Public Health Commission, no support from the town council. They had passed a resolution or some language to that effect, not supportive of this, and it ended up in zoning. They did not pass a direct ordinance. They have not walked back their negative opinion from what I've seen in any way, shape, or form on the use of retail establishments. I don't see any Weathersfield residents that are here in support of it. I haven't heard much support for it. I don't support making a change this quickly, and I think that right now the negatives outweigh the positives.
Peter?
I also cannot support it, and I just want to take this group back to the night when we made the decision to approve it consistent with the regulations we have for medical. As I said that night, and I'll state it again, I was on the fence for a long time. As a matter of fact, I was negative on the whole idea for Weathersfield. But after listening to Amanda and others, I decided, well, maybe we ought to loosen up a little bit here in Weathersfield. And I was okay with having a consistent set of regulations to medical. And I was the one that brought up the issue of church. I understand your point, but it's important to me. And I thought it was important that we should have a separation to places of worship, and it should be consistent with what we have exactly with the other regulations in town, meaning the medical ones. So that's what we approved that night. And it was a tight vote. I mean, it wasn't unanimous. It could have went the other way as well. And now to change our mind, just a little bit while later makes no sense to me. I think we stick with what we approved, and I think it's important to have separation to places of worship. So I can't support this.
Good, thank you. Anybody else over on this side?
I just make one comment. When I voted against this the first time because there was basically no staff of anybody that I thought had real knowledge was for this thing. But basically now we're just voting against it. I'm not sure why church has anything to do with this. But again, we voted for it before, and basically if you vote against this, you've just changed your minds. But I didn't vote for it the first time, to be honest with you. So I'm kind of either way. I'm kind of either way on it right now. I voted no the first time.
You voted not to have.
Not that, first time I voted not. I don't see any reason, I see no reason to have this in town. Doesn't make, it's fine, but I don't see any
Right,
benefit.
so I don't see why we should liberalize it even more than what we agreed to. That's my point.
I think
I'm with you, but basically, though, and again, you're basically now just voting against it if you voted for it before by this church. By the church rules, you basically, I don't know, there may not be a spot at all. I'm not sure there's any spots at all. But again, I'm up in the air in this thing right now because I voted against it the first time. I don't see any real basis why we want this in town or need it. But again, this will, I think if you vote for this change, you basically, well, you don't vote for the change, there won't be any. There may be some, so I doubt it, though. The base is not a lot of spots. But again, I'm against it anyways, so.
Chairman, just for clarification, Denise, have you done an analysis of what is available with the present regulations? Is it correct to to say, as we heard tonight, that essentially blocks it all out? I can't believe that. Is that true or not true statement?
Good question.
There's a very limited number of properties.
But there are properties.
And they might not necessarily be the most desirable locations, but
Okay,
yes.
well, that's,
Fair enough.
it's not my job to worry about are they desirable or not. We're not blocking out the whole town, is the point. There are locations with the current regulations as they exist.
Okay.
I also just happen to notice, one of the exhibits here, the problem is compounded through their handout here. They state the problem is compounded by buildings in retail quarters that were not built to be churches. Well, whether they were built to be churches or they're churches today. So that's just a fact. So whether the day it broke ground, it was supposed to be a church. It's a church today, and that's where people and families assemble. And Paul did a pretty good job of summing it up.
All right. Anybody else? Okay. So just to kind of boil it down, the application is to amend the existing regulations, which have the 1,000-foot separation for schools and churches, to make it so that it is 1,000 feet from schools and 250 feet from churches if they are separated by a 4-lane highway. If you vote in favor of it, you make that change. If you vote against it, you keep the 1,000-foot separation that we have currently in place. That's kind of the on-off switch of what the two options are here. And I know everybody individually has it clear in their heads, but, some of the kind of conversation might have been a little confusing. So with that said, does anybody else have anything else they want to say before we vote? All right. All in favor of the change to reduce the church separation distance to 250 feet, separated by a 4-lane highway, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed?
Nay.
All right. So 2 in favor, 7 against. All right, next item, application 215523Z, Town of Weathersfield, Kathy Bagley, seeking a special permit in accordance with section 6.7F, outdoor lighting of the Weathersfield zoning regulations for temporary lighting on Mini Catone Field for September and October 23, Monday through Friday, 6 and 9 p.m. as needed at 411 Wolcott Hill Road. Was Minnie Catone Joe's wife, or?
It's the best way to describe the
Okay.
little field on the side of Big Catone.
Okay.
Kathy Bagley, Director of Parks and Recreation here at the Town of Weathersfield, 505 Silas Deane Highway. And with me is Mike Maltesi, who's the Assistant Principal and Athletic Director at the high school. And what we're requesting is a special permit on a temporary basis for the small field on the side of Catone. The main field is lighted, the little field is not lighted. And what's happened is we've renovated the baseball field, the Esposito Field at the high school this summer. And that needs to stay offline in the fall for the sod and the turf and the field to get ready for the baseball season in the spring. And due to that fact, we've taken a major fall field that the high school uses in the fall offline. And because it's important to keep the students on campus and also just to be able to have some additional time on the field at the high school, we're just asking to put some temporary lighting up there for September and October.
All
If you
right.
have any other.
And just weeknights from 6 to 9.
Yeah, we'd be looking to use it when needed, as our programs have grown at the high school, and then there's a need to get kids out on the field at night, whether it's athletics, whether it's our marching band, there's a need for night practices now at the high school. It wouldn't be every night, it would be when we need to schedule kids on the field around all their other activities.
George?
Yeah, Kath, you remember a few years back, we ran into opposition over in that end of town where that is, for lighting. And I wondered if you have received any concerns expressed by nearby residents about this. And I could also ask of the town planner if she's received anything along that line.
Sure. For the lights themselves, because we have the policies for them as to how long they can be on and for what time. So the lights themselves, I haven't gotten complaints except if we've forgotten to turn them off at the right time. That's happened on occasion. And someone's just gone down and turned them back on as soon as we realized everybody left and nobody turned them off at one time. So for lights, that's a different story. We've had some issues just with the way the fields have been used and stuff, and some of the parking that's there, but not so much with the lights that I'm aware of.
Okay.
I don't know if you've...
I haven't heard anything regarding the...
You haven't heard anything?
Not on lights, no.
Good, thank you.
George, I've not gotten any complaints either.
Okay, good, thanks.
So this is really just a way to accommodate Esposito Field renovations. You're not adding new activities, you're not expanding, it's merely to take into account that you have a field offline and it gets dark.
Correct, and as it gets dark in the fall, quicker, end of September into October, freshman soccer comes to mind, marching band comes to mind before they jump onto the larger field when the varsity teams are done. They really can't get out there at 5 o'clock, 6 o'clock in October. It will give them a chance, so we're, again, sending them home and not practicing at all.
Peter?
Just to clarify, so this is only for 2 months?
Yes.
And then next year, it's not needed any longer?
Yeah, we're going to reassess how we work our practice out, how our teams handled, were we able to use some off-site locations, what was the travel and transportation like, if we want to use Cove Park, Millwoods Park, Celestine. Ideally, and talking to Kathy and talking to people with renovation for Esposito Field, if we could keep that as a baseball-only field, I think it would preserve it and not have to go through this type of renovation in the future. But right now, I guess because of just our time sensitive with the season starting in 4 weeks, football starts in 4 weeks, we just want to have a backup plan should we need it. When we continue with the rain like this, I'm sure the town's going to shut off all of our grass fields anyway. So to be able to use the turf as much as possible, I think this benefits a lot of the kids.
Thanks.
Kathy, that's the field at the south end of the football field?
That is correct.
Yes,
north.
Field?
North, sorry, north.
No. The baseball diamond you're redoing?
Oh, yeah, yes, it's in between the soccer field and the football field.
But this field is at the north end where the dead end of Church Street is.
That is correct.
Okay. What's the size, height, brightness of the lights? Because I remember back before we had the lights on Catone, I think you came in and had to get a special permit for one night. And, the explanation we had at that time was that the construction lights were going to be basically brighter and louder than the real ones once they got put in. I didn't know what the number was or anything as far as, what the expectation was as far as what kind of lights you were going to be bringing in and, how bright, how high, how loud, that kind of stuff.
Sure, Mr. Roberts. We're looking right now at, similar to if you've been by Wells Road, Webb Field for youth football, portable lights. A couple quotes I've received are roughly 23 to 25 feet high, run by a generator going at 10.5 horsepower.
Okay. Anybody else have questions?
Is there noise with these things as well, because you're running a generator?
Yeah, there would be a small noise.
Okay. Do you know what the decibel is?
Not at the spec sheet I have here. It's something I can certainly look into.
You use this type of portable lighting though for football games prior to the permanent lighting, correct?
I believe back in 2010 in the first home playoff game they did.
Yeah, because we had to do the special permit then.
And there's probably a lot larger footprint, so there's probably more. So, yeah.
Joe?
How tall are the temporary lights?
Up to 25 feet.
And how tall are the permanent lights? that are,
Those, I mean, they're, are they 100 feet?
I don't know.
No, they're not 100.
They're,
Way bigger.
I'm not sure. I
they're
could get.
taller, they're much taller.
They're definitely much taller,
Okay.
yes.
And is there any, just out of curiosity, how close is the closest home to where the lights would be? And is there any type of shielding, or are they just aimed, on the field itself?
I think what we'd look to do is put the lights on the sideline of what we're calling Mini Catone, facing towards the stadium field, so they wouldn't be shining towards, obviously, the homes there.
Okay.
All right. Anybody else? All right. Open it up to members of the public. Anybody in the public want to comment on this application? Sure.
All right, how you doing? Mark Frutuoso, 492 Church Street. I'm about as close as you can get to the field. I've dealt with Kathy before. She's great to deal with. I just want to start off by saying I have no issue with the lights or the field or anything that happens there. The issue that we do have, like she said before, I'm one of the people she's probably dealt with, is we've had issues with softballs coming over the fence and hitting cars, causing property damage, that kind of thing. So what I'm trying to figure out is, I've had extensive conversation with Fred Presley, and he has stated to me that they were going to be improving the netting that was going to be going up. So if it's just a matter of like the marching band or that type of thing, it's not really an issue, but it seems like to me they're probably going to wind up permanently lighting that field, and that's going to be a permanent issue. So I'm wondering where we're at with the netting, if that's even been in process, because that could be a potential issue. And the other issue we have is it's a pretty big safety issue in my eyes. When that side of the field is utilized, parents figure out that they can park their vehicles there, and they start utilizing the gate that's supposed to be locked at all times. There is an agreement that was written by a previous town manager. I have her information here. Bonnie Theron, that said that gate was to be locked and only used for emergency purposes. And the issue that we have is parents come racing down the street, kids are playing in the street. And then the other issue we have is when balls do go over the fence, the students or the people that are playing, they actually have someone that runs out to retrieve the ball. I have it on videotape on a Ring camera. I've seen it numerous times. They don't look. They dart right out into the street. So again, the netting would prevent that. It's not the lights that I have an issue with. It's the potential where we're going to be going with these lights. I want the field to be used. I want it to be utilized. We enjoy having it. It's nice to be there. But I want to make sure that safety is paramount and that these things are taken care of.
Excuse me, is that the north double gate and the chain link fence? Is that the one you're talking about?
It's the one that's on Church Street, so yes.
Because you can always pass through on the intersection of, well, I can't tell you the two names of the streets.
Oh, is it Holly Lane there or something? Yeah, that gate is, and that doesn't bother me because that's
Right,
up
that's
there.
narrow. You can't-
Yeah, and it's on a corner. It's
Got
a totally different setup.
No, you just clarify.
Yeah, no, that's fine. But other than that, I mean, I really have, again, no issue with the lighting. It's not a problem if it's a temporary thing and if they're not going to be playing baseball or that kind of stuff. But the town does need to look into making sure that there's proper netting, because the netting that is there, it's absolutely inadequate. It doesn't keep anything over, really. Everything keeps coming over. My truck's been hit, my neighbor's windshield's been broken, and unfortunately, that becomes an issue between us and our insurance companies. The town doesn't foot the bill on it. So we'd like to make sure that, something was at least put in place there that would prevent that. Other than that, I'm okay with the lights.
Okay, thank you. Anybody else in the public want to speak on this application? All right. Anybody else? One last time? If not, do you want to come back up and respond to the public comment and any additional things that you want to make sure that we have before we close the hearing?
No, as the gentleman said, we are working on those things. I haven't been part of the conversation with Mr. Presley about the additional netting, but I can certainly talk with him about that. Really, right now, it's just a temporary use, so this was just because of the field going offline, and we thought this would make an easier way to keep the kids on campus.
Okay. And is the anticipated September and October use going to involve more foul balls going into his yard, or is it other sporting activities?
Yeah, in the fall, there's no softball. In the fall, it would just be soccer, field hockey, and marching band, so hopefully none of those pieces of equipment are going over the
Yeah, I hope
over
the band
fence.
doesn't go over the fence.
And it's not funny, and it's serious, and we know it's an issue, sir, with softballs going over there. We did take some steps this past spring to put a security officer there. I send out information to all opposing schools, to all my softball parents, that you should not be parking on Church Street. You should be parking, in the designated parking lot on campus, but there's one of me and, multiple parents. But we are aware of an issue. We took some steps from Mr. Presley's office to Superintendent Emmett's office, and having an extra security officer there at all of our softball games this year. It was about midway through the season, we employed that strategy. So we're trying, and the netting, it doesn't stop every foul ball. I mean, I'll
Right.
be the first to admit that.
Okay. Is there a long-term plan or a short-term plan to put permanent lights on that field?
Not to my knowledge.
Okay.
No.
No, because I just kind of wanted to say that if there was, then we would probably be revisiting all of these collateral issues in a much more serious way, in terms of,
Yep.
rectifying them in a permanent manner. But anything else before we close the hearing? All right, thank you. Somebody want to make a motion to close the hearing?
Motion to close.
Second.
All right. Once again, by Jim, seconded by George to close the hearing. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Someone want to make a motion on the application?
Mr. Chairman, I'll be honored to provide such a motion. I move up for approval for application number 2155-23-Z- for 411 Walcott Hill Road, Weathersfield High School, of and for the town of Weathersfield. Move that the application seeking special permit be provided in accordance with section 6.7 for temporary lighting on the mini cotton field, for temporary lighting for September and October 2023, Monday through Friday between 6 and 9 p.m. as needed.
Second.
All right. Motion by Tom, seconded by George. Any discussion? If not, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Abstentions? Okay. Thank you. Next item, 3.3, public hearing, 215123Z. Joseph Sulo seeking a text amendment to the zoning regulations to amend section 52F3, permitted principal uses, to allow restaurant with drive-through or drive-up window as a conditional use permitted only after special permit approval by the commission in the BP Business Park District. And I know that a lot of you are here for this application, and just want to start by saying, that this is an application to amend the zoning regulations. It's not an application to do anything at a particular site. Obviously, it's a condition that has to be approved before something can be done at a particular site. But for purposes of tonight, please try to focus the conversation on the text amendment as it applies to the business park zone, rather than getting too far into the weeds on a particular site. I mean, if you want to talk about multiple properties within the business park zone, I think that would be informative rather than, just kind of dwelling on one. But, it's a public hearing and you can talk about it whatever you want. I'm just making that observation at the beginning. So on behalf of the applicant.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. For the record, my name is Peter Alter. I'm a lawyer. I practice law in Glastonbury, the firm of Alter and Pearson. Here tonight representing Joe Sulo, the applicant. Mr. Sulo is present with me. As the chairman has indicated, this is an application seeking a text change to the Weathersfield zoning regulations to allow by special permit a restaurant with a drive-through service in the business park zone. Currently, under the business section of your zoning regulation, under the hospitality uses, you'll find that a restaurant with drive-through or drive-up window facility is allowed by special permit in the general business and regional commercial zones. We ask that that be expanded to the business park zone in addition to those two existing special permit uses. Just by way of background, I know this commission is very experienced, but I will say once more that when you're asked to consider a text change, you're asked to act in a legislative capacity rather than an administrative capacity. When you're asked to consider a special permit or site plan approval, you act administratively. When you consider a text change, you act legislatively, and it's clear that you have much wider discretion when you act legislatively as opposed to acting administratively. So we believe that in acting in a legislative capacity, you're invested with a great deal more discretion and flexibility, but there are certain criteria that you must consider when you make that determination. Principally, there are really two matters that address themselves with respect to an amendment to your regulations. One is that you have to be satisfied that the proposal is consistent with your comprehensive zoning plan for the community. And the way this has been explained to me is that your comprehensive plan is a representative of what's transpired in the past in this community in terms of zoning activities. So that you look at the entire panorama of zoning within the town of Weathersfield, and a plan emerges with respect to how you have zoned your community. Residential portions of the town, commercial portions of the town have emerged, and you've adopted regulations to address that. The business park regulation is characterized as a commercial zone, as is the other two zones that I mentioned that currently permit restaurants with a drive-through. The business park zone currently permits sit-down restaurants that can also offer takeout services. Restaurants with outdoor dining are permitted in the business park, and a hotel is permitted in the business park zone already as part of the panorama of hospitality uses that can occur in the business park zone. We don't believe it's an unreasonable request to now ask that you include a drive-through facility pickup window as part of a restaurant use in the business park zone, and that it would be consistent with earlier decisions to incorporate hospitality uses into the business park zone, as you already have done, in permitting restaurants and takeout service, restaurants with outdoor dining, as well as hotels. So that I think it's fair to say that your comprehensive plan of zoning would permit you to act legislatively to add a drive-through facility in a restaurant already permitted in the business park zone. It has been stated by commentators and by case law that the comprehensive plan should promote the best interests of the entire community. And if you're satisfied that it does, that would assist you in arriving at a determination that this is a reasonable request. The business park zones sit in clearly established commercial corridors in Weathersfield. You have a list of the properties in Weathersfield that are currently zoned as business park, and I think it's a fair statement to say that most of them are in commercial areas. along state highways or arterial roads principally, and so that this requested expansion of the hospitality use to include the drive-through facility in the business park zone would appear to be consistent with the zoning designations that you've already established through your prior determinations. In addition to demonstrating that we're consistent with the comprehensive zoning plan, we also have to demonstrate to you that this proposal is consistent with the plan of conservation and development. As the comprehensive zoning plan is a view backwards as to what this commission has done in the past, your plan of conservation and development is your plan as a view forward as to what you're trying to achieve as the zoning body within this community. I did provide a quote from your plan of conservation and development in the materials that we submitted, and it would seem to me that seeking to maximize utilization of business sites and zones and to promote the development and redevelopment of underutilized commercial properties is certainly an appropriate goal that you've identified in your plan of conservation and development, and we think that this proposal supports that goal. I'm aware that the Commission has received a number of letters from interested citizens. I appreciate the comments of the chairman, so I won't repeat them. This is not an application on a particular site. This is an application to create a text amendment that, if adopted, would promote the opportunity to bring a special permit forward. And I think this is an important point that I'll make perhaps more than once. We will still, if you adopt this text amendment as we request, we would still come forward with an application for a special permit, assuming we can overcome the other hurdles, administrative hurdles that exist with inland wetlands and other agencies within the community. And you would have then the opportunity to evaluate whether or not our application meets the standards of your special permit as contained in your regulations. So even if you adopt this text amendment, you are not approving any site for any purpose. You're offering the opportunity to bring an application forward, and that application would be responsible for satisfying your special permit criteria in order to secure an approval from this commission. We believe that providing an additional opportunity for commercial expansion and providing an added service to potential community customers is an appropriate criteria for you to consider in considering this text amendment. We're asking that you change section 5.2 F3 by adding the ability to have a drive-in service within the business park for a restaurant, which is already a permitted use. We don't believe that this is a particularly significant request in terms of what's being sought. I think that we all learned in the past 2 years that restaurants that were able to offer these kinds of services to its customers were better able to withstand and better able to provide appropriate service to the customers because it offers an alternative other than going into a restaurant, sitting down. Some people are still not comfortable in that regard, and so this is a benefit to a significant number of people when they can make use of this as opposed to having to enter a facility to take advantage of its services. The conclusions that I would ask you to reach then are that nothing in this text amendment would adversely affect public health, safety, welfare, or property values of properties in Wethersfield. There is already in existence the opportunity for this kind of use within two of the business zones. We ask that you add a third opportunity to the existing regulation. The amendment does not hinder or in any way adversely affect the purposes of your zoning regulations, and it in fact will help promote an economically viable, positive growth of the tax base, promote employment opportunities, safety, and convenience to the community. Those are the purposes that you have stated within your business zone regulation preamble. And finally, our proposal, we believe, is consistent with both the comprehensive plan of zoning and the plan of conservation and development. And the only other request I would make is if you see fit to approve our application, that you set an effective date for the implementation of the text amendment. Happy to answer any questions.
George?
Yeah, I'd like either you and or Denise to, either one of you or both of you, to explain the history on this. Why didn't we allow this in our regulations prior to this? I mean, I don't understand why the business park wasn't included with drive-through.
I have.
One of you have a comment? You can start. Or
I
she
do,
can
and
start.
then certainly Denise has some institutional history as well. I think that the original motivating factor for permitting restaurants in the business park zone was as a result of the office building in the Great Meadows near the bridge, that office building needed food service, and it needed a restaurant because it's remote from everything. It's remote from Old Weathersfield, it's remote from Silestein Highway. So the people who were working in that building needed an opportunity to have a food service. And I think that was the initial motivating factor for adding food services to the business park zone. I think that when it was done, that was the focus of the commission, that it was that particular instance that brought that use forward. And so in looking at it, I think it was simply a matter of we need to approve
But
that
they
opportunity.
didn't want to put it in down there, so.
I'm sorry?
They didn't want to put a drive-in down in there, so that's why we think we didn't have it, or?
I couldn't find any evidence that it was ever actually considered in that way, but
No.
I
No,
could
I
be
mean,
wrong.
when I saw the dates, I was like, oh, okay, what happened? And it was basically Chris Henney at Putnam Park made the application to add sit-down and take-out restaurants and restaurants with outdoor dining in the business park zone. It was his application to do what he wanted to do there. And, you know, obviously, he had no intention of putting a drive-up window in the middle of the river,
Right.
you know.
So that kind of fouled up the whole town?
No, I mean, he got what he wanted,
Yeah.
but he didn't
Yeah, his
ask for the
restaurant, he got
drive-through,
in
so,
front.
yeah.
Yeah, well,
But
okay.
he asked for a text amendment?
That
Yeah,
was,
that's
yeah.
how
That's why
items,
the other parts are also, right, okay.
yeah, that's how items F1 and F2 got in there, it was the applicant was the owner of Putnam Park saying, we want to have a restaurant down here. And, you know, we did go through, I was surprised at how much conversation we had back then
Remember
even.
the drive-through issue down there now that you bring it up.
there's not.
There was discussion.
No,
Well,
no,
yeah, I know.
Restaurant.
no, I think there was discussion about other properties that were in the BP zone, but, you know, it was essentially, you know, he wanted to do it down there and it made sense, so.
But Rich, do you remember any discussion during those times about drive-throughs anywhere else? You know, outside of what he asked for?
No.
No.
No, frankly, I think the only discussions we've ever had about drive-throughs was 2004, when we put them in the regulations, because prior to that, I think every drive-through in town was granted by variance. And that was something that we wanted to take control of. So, you know, for banks and restaurants and all those kinds of things, we just didn't want to have drive-throughs be by variance, made them all by special permit.
That was
in
before
those two
the
zones.
time when
Makes
all
sense to you?
pharmacies, I'm sorry? That was when pharmacies came into needing a drive-through facility. That was, I know I got at least, well, more than one variance for that when towns had not acted to permit drive-throughs for.
See, we're leaning on you too for your knowledge and history of the town.
Well, I've done it for a little bit of time. And when Putnam Park was first opened, it had a little food service opportunity on the first floor because it was a fully leased office park. And over time, as tenants moved out and space became more available, the restaurants have obviously expanded within that building. But it was always that the driving force was the owner of that building, and he focused on what he needed. So that's, I think, how it happened.
Maybe, Peter, to you too, but if we approve this, I think you mentioned it, under special permit, it would still be our decision on the adequate conditions like safety, traffic, you know, sight lines. I mean, all that stuff would be up for grabs, right?
It's still our burden to present you with proof that we satisfy the
So any
regulation.
application that comes forward would have to meet those requirements.
That's correct.
Yeah, okay.
All right. Anybody on this side?
Just a general question about the history. I've lived here my whole life. I don't recall drive-thrus weren't allowed at all until like Burger King, that type of thing, right? What changed? There was some reason why we didn't allow drive-thrus. I mean, Burger King, I think, was the first one.
The one on the Silestine Highway?
I mean, we never had drive-thrus. I just can't remember. I was such a kid, but we never allowed drive-thrus.
It was just the banks.
Yeah, it was just
Banks were the first, that's it.
I mean, drive-thru for food, it wasn't allowed. So I'm not sure why that was the case, but there had to be a reason for it. You know, I don't.
Well, we wanted to be classy.
We also didn't have dealer's license here for car sale also.
Oh, we don't. We still don't.
Right.
I like that comment.
All right.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Okay, at this point, I'll open up to anybody in the public that wants to speak on this application. Just come on up and please give us your name and address for the record.
Good evening, Judy Tacey, 212 Middletown Avenue. And I'd like you to know I'd rather get a root canal than be here tonight, sitting and talking through here. I am against I am opposed to the text amendment proposal for a restaurant with a drive-through or a drive-up window in a business park zone in the town of Weathersfield. We all know why we're here tonight, but I think it's important for you to know how I'm here tonight. Over the past few months, our neighbors attended 3 public hearings with Historic District Commission on a proposal to build a restaurant with a drive-through in a business park on the corner of Maple and Middletown Avenue. And despite overwhelming opposition, the Puppet HDC approved the application by a vote of 3-2 with no stipulations. They were going to build the cookie-cutter design with the drive-through signage and speakers. I don't know if this commission can explain to me the application process. Why do we have to go through 3 public hearings on an application for use that is not allowed in a business park zone? At the HDC meetings, we and the incompetent HDC commission were told by the applicant's attorney that a restaurant with a drive-through was an allowable use in the business park zone. The attorney also informed us that the town document plan for Old Weathersfield does not apply to our neighborhood and that the HDC should accept us. We are thrilled that the HDC can save us from our neighbors' windows and screens, but they can't save us from this type of destruction. Those comments were recorded in the minutes. We were also told if we didn't like it, we should move. The vote was taken by the HDC for this application was not valid and should not have been taken place. I understand the illegal application is now on hold with the HDC. We have never seen this happen. We've lived on Middletown Avenue for 47, 48 years and never saw that happen, putting this on hold after they voted on something that couldn't be voted on. The vote cannot be validated after the fact by amending the allowable uses in a business park zone. And why would you want to create more problems to deal with by changing this text amendment? It's worked for us for all these years. Your vote here is going to show us how desperate the town is. And I don't know if you can answer this process of what we just went through. All the meetings, the voting, the putting on hold. What the heck is this? Anybody?
I can't speak to the HDC process. I mean, I know little more than what you already said. I can only speak to what our process is, and, you know, the first
Can you
step
speak
in.
to approving something that can't be done and then deciding to put it on hold? Is that normal?
I won't even guess what the HDC is doing. You know, I can only speak to what it is that we're doing. You know, and the first step is the applicant has asked for an amendment to the regulations to allow the use that he wants to apply for. You know, whether that has to go back through the HDC, whether the HDC's ruling was, you know, valid or flawed is something that, you know, they'll have to deal with.
Well, how do we handle that? As a community, as a tax-paying citizen, we're kind of like left with nothing.
Yeah, I mean, I would contact the town manager on that one. You know, we have no authority over the HDC. We only, you know, review, revise, and enforce our own regulations. So I think if there's a question about, you know, what happened with the HDC, and I assume you've already discussed it with HDC staff, if you haven't received any kind of satisfactory response there, I would say talk to
Just that
them.
it's on hold, waiting for this to validate what they did already.
Yeah,
And, you know,
It's news to
these
me.
business park zones are scattered all over the place. They're not all like the river and away from neighborhoods. A lot of these business parks butt up against neighborhoods. And this just, why would you even want to think about going there? It's worked for, I don't know how many years that's been in place. To try to reverse it now or open it up and listen to every single one that comes up is just insane. Like, I don't know if you have any questions for me.
no, but thank you for your time.
Thank you.
Is there anybody else in the public that wants to speak?
Brian Malicki, 222 Middletown Avenue. I know this is kind of it isn't the forum to talk about the problems that we're going to encounter if this passes through, but I am against it. I have to think that the people that came before some of you had a reason for designating certain properties as business park and had a reason for not allowing drive-throughs there. One thing that's coming to my mind on some of the properties that I saw on our map, down the street from us on the end of Spring Street, there's a property that I think currently is being used for quarrel and so forth. If and when that property runs out of use in that capacity and they decide to start putting other businesses there, we could end up with a McDonald's as the opening into Old Weathersfield. I mean, that wouldn't be something that would be out of the realm. And some of the other properties that are not along the river are in residential areas, and this would potentially open them up to having some type of drive-through in those neighborhoods as well. So I oppose this application. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else in the public? Sure.
Thank you. My name is Bob Woodward. I live at 456 Middletown Avenue, and I've lived there for 45 years. I guess my first comment is that you do a good job with the existing areas where drive-throughs are permitted. And I look at the one where CVS and the present Starbucks, and that Starbucks, as I understand the article in the paper, is being enlarged. The exit is controlled by a traffic light on Silas Dean. There are sidewalks on both sides. It's an area that should have a drive-through. You've got other areas on Silas Dean looking for tenants or owners that could use a drive-through. I look at some of the business park areas that I'm familiar with, and I wonder about safety. There's going to be more traffic. School buses go through these areas. Children are out waiting for buses. People walk dogs. There's a great increase in areas in Weathersfield of walking dogs. People push strollers, they ride bikes in the street. We have a cross-country team that goes through our street every so often. I see people walking in the street because Middletown Avenue does not have sidewalks on both sides all the way along. How much traffic is going to go into these areas if drive-throughs come to business park areas? How much is it going to worsen the neighborhood? Ponder that, please. Safety was one of the factors mentioned. Please ponder that. You may be a legislative committee, but you're also a committee, a commission for the town of Weathersfield, for all of us, every single person in this town. The other thing I wonder is this the only meeting you're going to have? When there are business parks all over town and some other neighborhood somewhere will get hit with a drive-through or something going into their business park in their neighborhood, and they'll say, we didn't know a thing about this. Are you going to have other hearings in other locations at other times? Are you going to publicize this more? This is not just one use that's going to come up if this is approved. This is going to affect other areas in town, and all of them border residential areas. Ponder this, please. You are here for all of us. Please remember that, and thank you for listening.
Thank you. And just to kind of reiterate, the application tonight is for the text change. If anyone, anywhere in town wants to apply for a drive-through in property located in any of the business park zones, we will be having a public hearing specific to that property at the time any application is made. So, whatever neighborhood it may affect, we'll be made aware of it, and there will be a public hearing where all of the issues related to, traffic, noise, appropriateness, compatibility with the neighborhood, as well as, physical characteristics of the site and the building will be evaluated at the time anyone makes an application for one of these uses, as would be the case if it was, a restaurant without a drive-through in any of these zones. So this may be the last meeting we have where we talk about the text change, but if there is an application to actually implement the regulation, if it's passed, there will be more public opportunities for input at that point. Anyone else?
Good evening. My name is Ron Tacey. I live at 212 Middletown Avenue. I'm opposed to the text amendment proposal for a restaurant with a drive-through or drive-up window in a business park zone in the town of Weathersfield. When I last spoke before this commission about 3.5 years ago, the commission had just approved the zone change from residential to business park on a couple pieces of property on our street. Ultimately, a restaurant was approved for the business park location on the corner. I pointed out at that time the transient nature of the restaurant business and what would we have at the corner when the proposed restaurant failed. I suggested that one business that Weathersfield never seems to have enough of is convenience stores or gas stations. And that type of business would create far worse traffic conditions at that intersection than we currently had. The restaurant was never built, and now the proposal is for an even more intense use than I could have imagined at the time. Businesses with drive-through windows have evolved over the past years from a customer convenience amenity to a primary business plan. Just Google drive-through and see how much information comes up. And most of that information is about towns stopping further development of that type of business. The first drive-through that I remember in Weathersfield was at the Connecticut Bank and Trust on the corner of Beaver Road and Silestein Highway. Boy, did that create problems backing up out onto the street. Although they're not called drive-through businesses, today's gas stations with convenience stores create the same traffic issues. Valero on the corner of Maple Street and Silestein Highway comes to mind. As a community, we learned the hard way that drive-through businesses have an impact on our town far beyond the location of the business. The business model has become very sophisticated, focusing on how fast can a car get through the line and pick up the order. Most of the national brands can do it in just under 5 minutes. Fast service means more cars. More cars means more business. One national franchise has now been nicknamed Carbucks. How many cars must go through a drive-through to be profitable? I suspect there's plenty of current data available to answer that question. For the purpose of discussion, let's say I was a developer and acquired property on Wells Road, currently zoned business park, and I went to obtain a national franchise business to locate at the opposite end of Spring Street. Very busy intersection, which is exactly what a drive-through needs. Doesn't matter that there's an active railway there that requires all the traffic to stop. Doesn't matter that the traffic often backs up from the light on the corner of Wells Road and Silestein Highway. Well, the more traffic and congestion, the better for business. But also a safety and traffic congestion problem for the town to solve. Have you ever visited the Connecticut Crash Data Repository? CTR t.crash.edu. I'd encourage everybody to look at that. It contains crash data for the last 3 years as reported by law enforcement. It can be sorted by town, by roadway. The status shows that Maple Street, from the intersection of Milltown Avenue up to the Silestein Highway, is easily the most dangerous section of road in Weathersfield by the number of accidents recorded. I encourage you all to look very closely at what that data tells us. We don't need to speculate about if a business with a drive-through, whether it be at Maple Street or Wells Road, will create a traffic problem. We already have a traffic problem. Adding hundreds of cars making turns at busy intersections is a recipe for disaster. Not allowing businesses like fast foods or banks with drive-throughs in a business park was absolutely warranted. It's actually a brilliant solution to protect Weathersfield from further development pressure involving drive-through businesses. Why would you want to change that and open Weathersfield up to congested traffic and unsafe conditions? Section 1.2.g of our town zoning regulations says lessen congestion in the streets. Town of Weathersfield does not need any more drive-through businesses, especially those that enter and exit from very busy streets. Please don't change anything on the list of allowed uses for business park zone. Save us all from future headaches. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else in the public?
Tom Mazzarella, 600 Walker Hill Road. So I tried to listen to how you explained the process, Rich, for an application if this were to be approved. So I just want to clarify that it's a special permit if you agree to this text amendment. And I thought it might be helpful if you could explain to some of the public here that has a lot of concerns of what the difference in the criteria for a special permit application in the business park zone would be versus someone that comes in for an office building in the business park zone that's an allowed use. So there's some additional criteria that have to be approved by the commission for a drive-in window. Just a suggestion. Might be helpful to reassure some of the concerned citizens of the additional steps that this commission has to take to approve a drive-in restaurant should this move forward. Thank you.
Thank you. I'll do that, but I'll let anyone else in the public who wishes to speak go first.
Hello, Christine Brown, 188 Middletown Avenue. I'm sitting here thinking, why was it established as a business park zone instead of a commercial zone in the first place? It sounds like a lot of business park zones are in residential areas, and again, to support my neighbor, Mr. Woodward, it's a safety issue. Why change something that's in place to protect certain areas when we already have a commercial zone in more appropriate areas that allow what they want, and those spaces are available in our town, so they can go there instead.
Thank you. Anyone else in the public wish to speak? We did receive additional correspondence from Christine Giacomo, apologizing, 417 Middletown Avenue, who's unable to be here, specifically providing input on a proposed Starbucks with drive-through at 24 Maple Street. So we'll just note that one for the record. There's a letter dated July 17th from Kevin Sullivan of Bike Walk Weathersfield, writing to strongly oppose proposed text amendments to enable approval of restaurants with drive-through or drive-up windows. Weathersfield has a serious problem due to overdependency on automobile-oriented development. Town staff is working hard to get grant funds to make more sustainable, non-automobile-oriented development, indicating that he believes that the commission should not approve the application because it doesn't satisfy the requirements of 10(1)(F5) of the regulations regarding public health, safety, and welfare. Drive-through is a barrier to mixed-use development, and standalone restaurant is a limitation on the property value. There's additional correspondence from Tom Carson, 12 Avalon Place, essentially saying that instead of making our zoning regulations more permissive to allow for the construction of drive-through restaurants, Weathersfield should be joining the movement of forward-looking municipalities across America that are restricting the development of drive-throughs in their communities. And I think this letter, including a couple of articles, had been forwarded to all of us earlier today. Following up on Mr. Mazzarella's comment, the process for any kind of special permit application is found in Article 8 of the zoning regulations, and I'll just kind of highlight the sections that are applicable, saying that if this application to change the regulations is approved, anyone who wants to put a restaurant, drive-through, or outdoor dining within any business park zone property anywhere in the town would have to apply for a special permit, and the criteria that the commission has to evaluate and that the applicant has to convince us is satisfied involve suitability of the location being in harmony with the orderly development of the area and compatible with other existing uses, neighborhood compatibility won't alter the essential characteristics of the area or adversely affect property values in the neighborhood, appropriate structures and landscaping that they're appropriate for the activity in relation to other structures in the vicinity, suitable access and parking, the streets are adequate in width and have adequate capacity, entrance and exit driveways, are safe, easy accessibility for fire apparatus, overall circulation, meaning that, just general traffic throughout the town would not be impacted negatively, that there are adequate public utilities to serve the purpose, that the proposed plans have provided for conservation of any natural features and protection of the environment in the area, that the proposed use or activity will not have detrimental effects on the public health, safety, or welfare, won't conflict with the purposes of the zoning regulations, and will further the goals and objectives of the POCD, that any signs or lighting are compatible with the regulations, adequacy of landscaping and screening, appropriate provisions for pedestrians, bicyclists, and so forth, not result in an excessive number or proximity of like uses, incompatibility with the neighboring uses, or other conditions that the commission finds would impair the vitality and character of surrounding uses, and that it won't have negative impacts on neighboring towns or on the region. So those are criteria that have to be satisfied for any special permit application, including one for a drive-through in the business park zone. So, any last comments from the public? Sure.
Just a quick question. To file a special permit would require a public hearing?
Correct.
Thank you.
Yes. Yes, special permit requires notification to the neighbors, publication of a notice in the newspaper, and a public hearing. Okay. Attorney Alter.
I really don't have a response to most of the comments that were made. I do want to just put on the record that as soon as the error that we made in terms of going forward with the HDC application, not recognizing the lack of a regulation that allowed a drive-through. As soon as that was discovered, I immediately provided a letter to the HDC explaining that error and asking that no further action be taken. We also had started going forward with the Inland Wetlands Agency. We immediately withdrew that application as well in order to address the issue as we should have originally, which is by way of a text amendment. So that's what brings us to today.
All right. Anyone have any last questions for the applicant? Tom?
Not so much for the applicant, but I would like to hear from Denise, our town planner, with regards to the experience of the town relative to issues of safety and congestion for those businesses that are operating, particularly restaurant facilities that have drive-through aspects, and what's been, the history of the town relative to those types of applications, those kinds of businesses, particularly with reference to public safety and motor vehicle congestion.
So as part of the text amendment application, I did not explore crash data for existing drive-throughs in other zones in town.
Okay, so there's really currently no history or guidance that you can provide the commission relative to the town's experience in those areas where such activities have been permitted.
Not specifically, not property specific, no.
Question number 2, and I'm having some, bear with me because I'm having some difficulty trying to formulate the precise nature of my question. But relative to the current status quo of the business park zones not having drive-through facilities, do you find that current status to be in conflict with the plan of conservation and development?
I think, as the applicant noted, let me just put my note out. Excuse me, just give me a minute.
Mm-hmm.
So there was a reference in the application to a section in the Plan of Conservation and Development on page 68 regarding the goal to seek maximization and utilization of business sites and zones to promote the development and redevelopment of underutilized commercial properties. I think that there's no apparent conflict with current policies or regulations, but the commission has to consider whether the adoption of the amendment will promote the appropriate development of for the properties included in the business park zone, which I noted in the memo. So it's not, so you'd have to look at the properties that I listed in their entirety.
Denise?
Yep.
This is a follow-up question. I looked at the diagram that you have here. It seems to me that those locations almost always touch some residential areas. Is that correct? That's how it seems by looking at the diagram. It's hard to see here on my computer.
I would say all except the Putnam Park and Burbank
Oh, yeah,
properties.
absolutely, yeah, I understand. Okay, so the other ones, as it shows.
Yes.
Denise, another question for you. Is the restaurant or restaurants in the Putnam Park building the only restaurants currently located in the business park zone?
Yes.
Yeah, the sideways sheet of paper confirms that. Just basically itemizes what all of the individual business park zone properties are.
Okay, thanks, Richard.
Dave?
Just so I can make clear, based on what Pete said, I'm trying to read the business park zones. Basically, what I can see is the difference between them and regular commercial zones is that they're kind of in residential areas, other than Putnam Park. I'm not sure why they're there. Is that the way I understand it? Reading and looking at this? I'm not real clear on it. Maybe someone been here longer would be clearer.
They also don't allow any retail use in the business park zone at all.
So it's basically really like a commercial type business.
It's like warehouse,
I'm trying to wrap
distribution,
my head around the idea of
manufacturing
having
and
like a
office.
restaurant or
No residential in the zone specific.
McDonald's or one of those things wouldn't make sense to me. That's, so,
Yeah, I
okay.
mean,
I'm with, that's what you, if that's how you explain it, it makes sense to me.
Yeah, I mean, and I think, you know, if you want to kind of go back in time to the nomenclature, I think it was the industrial park zone, and we thought that, you know, since many of them were not
We're not,
industrial, I mean, they weren't like machine tool company locations, you know, and also to try to, you know, basically market Progress Drive and some of the other sites better. I think when we redid the regulations back in '04, we changed the name to the business park zone.
I get it.
Okay. Anything else for the applicant? All right, any final words?
No, sir. Thank you
Okay,
very
thank
much.
All right. Does someone want to make a motion to close the public hearing, or do we need additional
So
information?
made, Mr. Chairman.
I'll second it.
All right, motion made by George, seconded by Peter to close the public hearing. All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed, abstentions? Okay, hearing's closed.
Mr. Chairman, I would move, just for purposes of discussion, to approve the application.
Okay. Motion to approve made by Joe for purposes of discussion. All right, second by Jim.
Right, and then I'd like to share my thoughts on the motion, and I'm opposed to the application. I'm going to vote against it, and let me just sort of share my thoughts and reasoning with you if I could. You know, Attorney Alter touched upon changing the regulations as a legislative act. It's one of the most important acts that I think we as a zoning commission can take. And there's discretion given to us in doing it, but I think when you change the regulations, you know, you're changing them for every single property in the business park district. It's not limited to a single property. And I guess as we talk about the history a little bit about how restaurant use even got into the business park in the first place, it was because of a particular property, the Putnam Park office building. And now we're being asked to further expand that by allowing drive-in restaurants. And again, I think restaurants, to begin with, were, I'm going to use the term afterthought. They weren't a driving or primary use for that district to begin with. And my feeling is that allowing drive-through restaurants wouldn't be in keeping with the character or the purpose of either the business park district or all of these residential districts that adjoin those pockets of business park throughout town. And I would note, as I think the applicant did, that the GB and RC districts allow restaurants with drive-throughs. Those, I think, are primarily the large commercial corridors of the Silestein Highway and the Berlin Turnpike. There are lots of properties in those zoning districts where anyone can come in and seek a drive-through through a special permit. They're widespread properties that are zoned like that. And in addition, in the business park zone, there's lots of uses other than restaurant that are permitted. And I don't think any showing has been made that there's a need to expand those uses to restaurant with drive-through. To me, I guess some of the issues that we would be introducing into the business park zone if we allow this, I think traffic generation is a prime and substantial issue. And I think, I think part of it is we can just observe how drive-throughs operate when we drive up and down the Silestein Highway and the Berlin Turnpike and in other towns as well. I think traffic engineers and the traffic ITE manual of traffic generation will show that the traffic generation of a restaurant with a drive-through is exceptionally higher than a sit-down restaurant. So I think safety is an issue, whether it's cars on the road, cars in the parking lot, pedestrians, and so forth. I think noise with speakers at drive-throughs are a potential issue. And, at the end of the day, I think GB and RC are the appropriate areas for those uses. In terms of the plan of conservation and development, I think there's other sections of that plan that the application is in conflict with. So, for example, one of the goals is maintain community character. Another one is protect residential character. And I think the section cited by the applicant about business development uses the word appropriate business development, and I don't think a drive-through is appropriate for this district. I also don't think it meets the test for a zone change in the sense that I don't think it promotes the interest of the entire community, and I don't think a zone change is supported based on what may be beneficial to a particular single property, which I think is what's at issue here, basically. And again, I think it's on a very ad hoc basis. We can't look back to what we did with Putnam Park with the restaurant, and that may have worked out fine, but it's sort of these bits and pieces of adding to the regs rather than a thought-out comprehensive process. So I don't think this would be proper planning or proper zoning. I don't think it would be consistent, as I said, with the BP district or the nearby residential or the zoning regs and the differences in zoning districts throughout the town. And I also think it's a real big change to me. I mean, it's one thing to have a restaurant, but to have a restaurant with a drive-through, I think is a totally different animal. So I will be opposing the application.
Thank you. George?
No, I just wanted to be sure he wasn't saying eliminate restaurants.
No, and one more thing, George, if you don't mind if I interrupt.
You said just the drive-through.
One more thing I forgot. I mean, there's been a lot of talk, and I agree, about a special permit being needed, but I think it's important for everybody to recognize by allowing it even by special permit, you're opening the door to it. And it's commonplace when people apply for a special permit, if they don't get it, they can appeal it. And Attorney Alter explained that a zone change is a highly discretionary legislative decision. Special permits are not viewed with the same degree of discretion. So if we open the door, we could get appealed on any given case. If we deny it, we could get reversed and we end up with a drive-through.
Can I interrupt
Sure.
you so you don't
Sorry.
keep going on? Don't you think our business parks are doing well? Do you think they are, the one in the western side of town, for example?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's,
I think they're doing very poorly.
it's an interesting,
I'm not impressed with that at all.
it's an interesting, we have
And aren't we
pockets.
trying to encourage industrial
Well,
development?
do we want
business parks?
do we want drive-throughs near Progress Drive?
A
The
restaurant you
correct-
don't want
the
in
correct-
those places?
George, I don't want to go back and, let's
No,
one talk
I
at
mean-
once, but I don't think the pockets that we're talking about where business park are zoned need it. And again, I think if you open the door to it, to me, the fact that it's a special permit is not the answer. That's like saying, change the reg, take the risk, but don't worry about it because there'll be another hearing. But that hearing, that application have very different standards associated with them. And I just haven't heard anything that, in my judgment, says we should make this change. I think
So
there's lots.
you're anti-business then?
Absolutely not, George. I think this could
Oh,
hurt
no.
other businesses. You want to have a drive-through
So I
with
don't
traffic
think I understand
streaming out the street, that may affect entry to other businesses. So, there's lots of ramifications, is what I'm saying. And have we heard any evidence tonight that says of the 8 or 9 business park districts, they're failing, they're going to go under, and unless they can have drive-through restaurants, they will not
I've looked at
survive?
the one on our western side of town, and nothing seems to be going on there.
Which one, George?
What
Progress Drive?
what is it?
Is it Progress Drive you're referring to?
Progress Drive.
Is that an appropriate,
Nothing's happening.
is that an appropriate area for a drive-through restaurant, George, in that cul-de-sac?
know.
I don't think
It
so.
might be for the businesses up in there, and there's a school up there,
No-
that kind of thing.
No one has approached us to say that that's something needed
There's a
or
restaurant going in
warranted.
right next to it, down in the Berlin Turnpike, but, backs up to it.
Well, and I think the Berlin Turnpike is, at least
Yeah,
in the
that's a good
Weathersfield
location,
zone
but-
for that.
Maybe the park needs something.
Again,
Or a
no,
restaurant at
no-
least.
no showing has been made. I don't think that overall in the business park district, this use is needed.
Peter?
Interesting discussion, guys. I'm in agreement with Joe on this. I don't think we should open the door. So I am against this. But let me just make a couple, Joe covered a lot of ground, so I don't want to go back to that. But I just want to bring it a little closer to my feelings about this. And I am going to work on the plan of development with Denise, so at some point, maybe we'll revisit this whole thing for the future, because I always look at the future. What do I want Weathersfield and my kids, hopefully will stay in town, or maybe move to town. What do I want this town to be? When I moved to Weathersfield, I was just, a kid. It was a different town than it is today. I think it's gotten denser and denser and denser, and commercial activity is part of the problem. I understand this debate, we need more business, we should have more business, but at some point, we've got to look at this town and say, what character do we want for this town going forward? I think that these areas should stay less intense rather than introduce an aspect that would make them more intense. So that's my primary reason why I'm against it. They certainly need businesses in this area, and if someone wants to put a restaurant there, by all means, they can do so. But I don't think we need to intensify it any more than that at this point. I think you asked Denise, is there any evidence of any concerns with safety and so forth, Tom? I would love to hear the answer to that question. I don't think we'll get it tonight. But just anecdotally, I don't know what experiences you've all had with drive-throughs, but just lately, I was on the Celestine and I was trying to go into CVS, not to Starbucks. I couldn't come off the highway because everybody was backed up. This is before the construction that's going on there. So this was not related to the construction. So I do think that the intensity introduced by drive-ins is a problem. Traffic issues and safety would be a problem. So I'm against it and will vote against it tonight.
Tom?
I tend to agree with much of the reasoning that Commissioner Hamner has indicated. I can't find myself supporting this application for this zoning text amendment. But I'd also like to, additionally emphasize that most of the business park districts that would be affected are really adjacent to residential areas, and therefore they're highly vulnerable to all the deleterious effects that could happen with regards to traffic backup, safety concerns and the like, from having motor vehicles coming in and out and running through, essentially a fast food operation. And I'm also want to indicate I'm quite persuaded by the letters or communications that we received from Mr. Sullivan from Bike Walk Weathersfield, and also the quite long email that we received from Mr. Tom Carson of 12 Avalon Place. I think the totality of all of both Mr. Hamner's arguments as well as from these communications that I mentioned in reference make a very, to my mindset, very persuasive case from an overall policy angle not to approve this zone text change.
Thanks. Jim?
I have the greatest respect for all my fellow commissioners. However, I hate to say it, but I have a 180 different view than my fellow commissioner, Mr. Hammer. I understand the difference of changing this text amendment and an application. Every application that comes before us, we risk appeal and having it reversed due to a judicial process. Every time we make a decision. Looking at all of our zones in Weathersfield, the ones that just come off the top of my head of CVS and Starbucks, the only buffer between anywhere, for the most part, in Weathersfield, whether it's the Berlin Turnpike, South Highway, just take the South Highway, the buffer between those drive-throughs is a railroad to the residential communities. We have an older, established community. Any project we're gonna do in this town is a major lift. You can go to Cromwell, where we have level, open land. You can go to many other towns. You go down to Westbrook. There's large tracts of land that are easily developed and don't have the same challenges as Weathersfield does. We're an old, established community, so everything we do here is a much heavier lift, a much costlier lift. But if our community does not continue to evolve and adapt to the environment in which we realistically live, i.e., like it or not, we're an automotive-driven community here. Whether we want to have other modes of transportation, which would probably be wonderful, the reality is what we have today is the car. Now, Pete, I'm going to ask you, you went to CVS. You probably didn't use the drive-through window that time when you were blocked going into Starbucks, were you? But I only can speak for myself. When I'm going to get a prescription, yep, I'm highly guilty of both using Starbucks and the CVS drive-through. When I first got my license, none of those things existed. Starbucks didn't even exist in Connecticut. It was so long ago when I got my license. But I remember when CVT was the only place that had a drive-through in Weathersfield. We're a different community today. And there's a line at Starbucks because our citizens, a lot of them who I've heard from, and I respect the people on Middletown Avenue, and I understand I hear what they're saying, but they wouldn't be jammed up if our citizens weren't using them and didn't want them. And as far as like appropriate use and viability, economics determines the viability. Every time a voter drives through every time a car drives through a drive-through window, that's a vote for, we need a drive-through window. So when we go down this list, a lot of these sites, they aren't appropriate because they aren't viable for automotive traffic. A couple sites that I picked off here that I look at like viable for development with a drive-through, they're all on busy roads. Fact. That's why there's a drive-through there, on a busy road. You don't put a drive-through on a cul-de-sac. At least I haven't run into one yet. But I just look at it as, yes, it's change. Do we like it every time? But we got to keep moving. We got to keep adapting our community. It isn't always perfect, but if the citizens from Weathersfield in this area didn't want this, it wouldn't be a viable drive-through site at all. It wouldn't be a viable restaurant site. So I am in favor of it.
Anyone else?
If no one else, I'm sorry, was somebody else going to talk? I was just going to say, Jim, we're on opposite sides on this one, but I would just say, I would say there are ample opportunities for drive-throughs, Silas Deane Highway, Berlin Turnpike, there's acres and acres and miles of road zoned for it already, and I don't see the need for such a small pocketed slice of business park to have to fall into the mix. There's more land for it than is needed, as is.
And my rebuttal to that would be, if those sites were viable from a business point of view, and then, if they're viable, that makes them business appropriate, those would be considered right now, and they wouldn't even be looking at this. But,
And I guess to
I still
me-
respect your opinion.
Well, and I respect
So,
yours,
yeah.
but I mean, if we come around in a circle, we shouldn't be rezoning for one property, an entire zone.
I'm not looking at it as one property. When I checked, that's why I went through the list, and I kind of looked at the viability of what was on the list. Just kind of.
I'm opposing this, I'm with Joe 100%. And Jim, I tell you, based on what you're saying, why don't we put a McDonald's at the high school and have a drive-through right there? Just pave the whole place.
Well,
At some point, you gotta draw the line.
I can only speak about when I was there, it wasn't drive-through.
I'm just saying,
I can only say when I
I'm
was
just
there.
saying, at some point, you gotta draw the line. I think Joe's got the right line, in my opinion, so.
I still respect all you guys, I'm just different.
All right, anybody else have any final comments? Anyone that we haven't heard from yet? All right. So the motion was made to approve the text amendment. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed?
Opposed.
Okay, so that's 6-3. Motion fails. Other business, 5.1 Frank Tobacco Reservoir Estates subdivision, reduction of construction bond.
Thank you.
Here's the hidden agenda.
Well, what hidden agenda?
Well, it means we haven't seen it yet.
I never got this?
The secret paperwork.
Memo from Derek Greger to Denise Bradley dated today, saying the town has a $570,000 performance bond for Phase 2 of Reservoir Estates subdivision. Yeah, currently the bond is $570 based on the attached work to date. Derek is recommending that the commission reduce the total bond for Phase 2 to $208,500. Then there's the second one for Phase 3 construction bond, saying the town's holding two separate bonds, 138 for water and sewer infrastructure, 153 for the installation of the remaining Phase 3 infrastructure. He's got revised associated bond estimates and is recommending to the commission that we authorize the full release of the $138,000 for water and sanitary sewer and reduce the amount of the Phase 3 bond for remaining infrastructure and utility improvements to $106,000. Mr. DeBacco.
Basically correct. We're trying to reduce all three bonds. Just one little typo, I think. It's the $138,800 cash bond. The $800 is missed. So if we can just clarify that, we get that all back, it'd be great.
So the bond was originally $138,846, really. So just be authorizing the full release of the $138,846 bond for water and sanitary sewer in Phase 3.
Correct.
Okay. Does anybody have any questions on this?
Well, it's the full cash bond on the 138 and then a partial reduction from the 153 to the 106. So there's-
Correct.
Okay,
Yeah, so I mean, it's essentially,
three bonds.
well, we should probably do it by phase, do the reduction. Somebody want to make a motion to reduce the performance bond on Phase 2 from $570 to $208,500?
So moved.
Second.
All right. Motion by Joe, seconded by Jim. Any discussion? If not, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Okay, and for Phase 3, I guess we want a motion to authorize the full release of the $138,846
So moved.
bond for water and sanitary sewer, and to reduce the infrastructure and utility bonds from $153,500 to $106,000.
So moved.
So moved. Second.
All right, motion by Joe, second by George. Any discussion? If not, all in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed?
Mr. Chairman, for clarification's sake and for benefit of the applicant, with this action that the commission is taking tonight, what will be the effective date for these reductions to take place?
As soon as they can be processed by the town, I guess. What are they, cash bonds?
They're cash bonds, the work
Yeah.
is complete, and we're continually working on the rest of it anyway. So we'll be back in front of you probably there's a fourth bond that we haven't touched that we've done work on. And then we're gonna be completing all the infrastructure minus the binder in the next 4 to 6 weeks, so we'll be back in front of you for 3 other bonds. And then we're pulling permits. So the cash itself, I think today would be the day to release it, because the work has been completed and passed.
Well, I mean, yeah, we're authorizing the release and the town will implement it.
Yeah, I was just answering Thomas's question, that the date is basically passed and we're just acting on it today.
I know, there's a lapse, though, between the action, of voting by this commission and the time it takes the town to actually carry out that finding or decree. And I was just wondering what then would be the real effective date for the actual action to be able to take place.
In other words, when you get his check.
Yeah, I don't know.
And, okay. Do you have an estimate, Denise?
So it's not like a typical application where we set an effective date based on when the decision was published in the paper. So this is really just a function of the engineering department and when they can turn that
So
around.
it's basically
So I can't
town
speak for the
administrative
department.
procedures then?
Yeah.
Always was.
Okay, any other questions?
No?
Thank you.
Thank you.
Good night.
All right, next item, minutes of June 20th, 2023.
Make a motion to approve, Mr. Chairman.
I'll second.
You have a question?
Yeah, I'm not sure it was accurate, and I don't remember, there was one statement in there where I think it attributed asking about elevators to me. I don't think that was me. And that's a
I didn't
nit.
think it was you either, so I asked the question. I don't remember you addressing it.
No, I don't know enough about elevators to address it.
Yeah, I think that's an error there.
Yeah.
It's a good point.
Yeah, I don't know. I was in a different town getting yelled at that night.
Want us to include that in a minute?
I'll have to
No.
go back and listen.
All right,
to
it's just
it.
a- it's just a nit.
Yeah, I don't remember.
Make a motion to approve with the change, yeah.
Yeah.
All right, motion has been made to approve with that change. Is there a second?
I did.
Okay. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Abstentions?
You're gonna abstain, Rich?
Yeah, I will too. All right, staff reports.
Okay, so I did receive the Mylars for the self-storage facility at 2176 and 2180 for signature tonight. So they are developing the construction drawings, and I do anticipate the building permit for that to be submitted shortly. The Town of Weathersfield Riverfront Recapture and the City of Hartford conducted interviews for the recreational trails grant that we received from the DEP. There were 4 RFPs submitted. We interviewed 2 firms. Tomorrow we have a meeting to select the consultant. The recommendation will be given to council, and it will be on their consent agenda for the August meeting.
Denise, what project is this, recapture?
This is for the study of the multimodal trail extension from Hartford.
Along the river?
Is this got something to do with the
They're going to, as part of the study, identify route options.
Okay,
Through your farm.
okay,
No?
maybe.
Sorry, I had to get you.
I've also got the affordable housing RFP ready to go, so I will just, before I send that out, send that to you guys for a review, just in case you have any comments.
Plan of development, what about it?
So, not knowing what the discussion length was going to be this evening, I did not include that on the agenda.
Probably a good idea.
But we will be looking to set the public hearing after,
Next time, maybe?
so it would be the first meeting in September.
Oh, okay.
I had a meeting with the Hereford Brainerd Airport consultant, BFJ, and several neighbors with concerns a week or two ago. And I will send a link to you guys to the consultant's website, just in case you might have any comments on their plan. And that's about all I have specifically, unless you have any questions on the...
Just curious, their plan, can you give us a brief summary of what he's thinking?
I'm sorry, on what?
You said his plan, right? A link to his plan, the consultant's plan on the airport? I'm just wondering what's the bottom line of what they're proposing?
So there is no proposal. They're looking for public input on future reuse and redevelopment of the property.
Okay.
Remember, they fly right over his farm.
They do. Pretty low, too.
He has great concern about it.
Put an
I don't
airstrip
blame
in
him.
there.
I would if I were there.
Counting the grapes.
I can see the pilots. I wave to them when I'm working on my grapes.
Yeah, I'm sure they have an effect
Hey,
on
it's
it.
Billy.
Grapes don't like that stuff.
All right, I think it makes them flourish. All right, anybody have any other questions for Denise? Any legitimate, serious questions?
Yeah, I don't know if there's any project-specific questions that you have, but...
Is there-
Human,
The question is, will there be, we usually decide on whether to meet in August once, I guess, as we get closer, and is it looking like there'll be a need to? I'm just curious.
We do have at least 3 applications pending. They are for recreational vehicles and accessory structures.
So would that be the first?
Yeah, I'll be away.
Those are like homeowner ones?
Sheds and, yeah.
Can we Zoom them?
If you would like me to advertise the meeting that way, I absolutely can. The meeting is August 2nd. And then the second meeting, I'm sorry, it's August 1st. The second meeting will be August 15th. Right now, I don't have anything pending for that agenda.
I'd be game to try the Zoom if other people would be,
In August?
for the August 1st, just for those 3.
Yeah.
Yeah, I still have PTSD from all the years of Zoom, but yeah, I'll be game.
Get back up on that horse.
That's right, in case you fear his head on.
My fear of laggy Wi-Fi. Any public comments? Members of the public, have anything you want to talk about?
Getting a little thin out there.
What are you two guys doing out there?
They're members of the public.
Yeah, they're members of the public.
He isn't.
Motion to
I'm not public.
close.
You're more important than the public.
He's wearing his
Second
coat
that.
hat.
What?
Can you show oil in on the young pharmaceutical building that's opening on Progress Drive shortly?
Yeah, I just signed a CO for the John Kalisia's new development, the medical facility at Progress Drive. So there is,
Progress, right?
yeah.
We approved it.
It's the one that you can now see through where Atlas Tile used to be.
Oh, yeah.
Beautiful.
Oh, good.
Hence the new Starbucks probably
Congratulations.
being built to
Good luck.
All right. Is there a motion to adjourn? Jim?
Second.
Second by Peter. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
And I guess I should have welcomed Joe and decided, do you want to quit yet, or is...
Do you have an acceptance speech?